The morning my father's lawyer called to tell me I'd been written out of the will, I was standing in my kitchen in Oakville, still in my scrubs, holding a coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. I didn't cry. I didn't even sit down. I just stood there looking out at the backyard. The one I'd spent 3 summers landscaping myself because I couldn't afford a contractor. And I thought, of course they did. Let me back up. My name is Sloane and I'm 31 years old. I'm a registered nurse at Halton Healthcare. I own a small house on the west end of Oakville. And for the last 4 years, I have been quietly, methodically building a side business that my family knows absolutely nothing about. I run a pet care and boarding company, small-scale boutique word of mouth, that last year cleared just over $90,000 after expenses. I also do mobile veterinary coordination, connecting rural Ontario families with visiting vets when they can't get into a clinic. It started because I was broke and loved animals. It grew because I was organized and my clients trusted me. My family thinks I'm barely scraping by. They think that because I let them think it. I learned a long time ago that telling my family you have money is the fastest way to not have money anymore. My brother, I'll call him my brother because that's what he technically is 3 years older than me and has never, not once in his adult life, held a job for longer than 8 months. He's charming. He's the kind of guy who walks into a room and makes everyone feel like they're in on something. My mother has always adored him. When I was 12 and he was 15, he told her I broke her favorite lamp. I had not touched the lamp. She grounded me for 2 weeks and bought him a new video game to cheer him up after the stress of dealing with a difficult sister. That's the kind of household I grew up in. My father was softer. Not kind exactly, but softer. He didn't pick sides as aggressively as my mother, but he didn't push back either, and in the end that amounts to the same thing. He died in February 3 months before that lawyer's call. Pancreatic cancer. Fast and brutal, and in a way I still feel guilty for thinking, almost merciful in its speed. He left a will. I found out about it the same way I found out about most things in my family. Last, and by accident, my brother called me on a Tuesday 2 weeks after the funeral. He didn't ask how I was doing. He said, "Dad's lawyer wants to meet with all of us on Friday. Can you make it to Mississauga?" I said yes. I rearranged 2 client bookings and a shift swap and drove 40 minutes in March sleet to sit in a beige boardroom and find out that my father had left his RRSP, his car, his cottage on Georgian Bay and the bulk of his savings, approximately $140,000, to my brother. To me he left his coin collection, which had been appraised at $800, and a handwritten note that said, "I know you'll be okay, Sloane. You always land on your feet." My mother sat across from me and did not look at me once. My brother, to his credit, looked briefly uncomfortable. Then the lawyer said something about the cottage requiring ongoing maintenance costs, and my brother's face relaxed, and I understood that he had been very well prepared for this meeting. I drove home in the sleet. I did not cry. I turned on a podcast about a woman who'd hiked the entire Pacific Crest Trail alone, and I listened to it all the way back to Oakville, and when I got home I sat in my driveway for a while with the engine running. The coin collection, it turned out, was worth closer to $4,200 once I had it properly assessed. So there was that. 3 weeks passed. I didn't call my mother. She didn't call me. This was not unusual. We could go months. I focused on work. The hospital was short-staffed. The boarding business had a wait list. I was training a part-time assistant named Yolanda who had more natural instinct with anxious animals than anyone I'd ever met. Then my mother called. It was a Saturday morning. I was doing a medication check on a border collie I was boarding, a neurotic, beautiful animal named Fig who needed eye drops 3 times a day. When my phone buzzed with her name on the screen, I let it ring. Then I called back an hour later. "Your father's cottage," she said before I even finished saying hello. "The property taxes are due in June. There are also some repairs needed before your brother can list it. List it." So they were selling the Georgian Bay cottage my father had owned for 22 years. Fine. "Okay," I said. "We need you to contribute." I held the phone away from my ear for a second and looked at Fig, who looked back at me with enormous, concerned eyes. "Contribute how?" I said. $15,000, my mother said. "The roof needs work and there's a problem with the septic. Your brother is managing everything, the coordination and the contractors. You should be helping Sloane. He's doing all of this alone." I want to be very precise about what I felt in that moment because I think it matters. It wasn't rage. It wasn't even hurt. It was something quieter and colder. like stepping onto ice and feeling it shift under your weight, that half second of understanding before you decide what to do next. Mom, I said, Dad left me $800 worth of coins. He left you his collection because he knew you appreciated it. You always said, he left my brother $140,000 and a cottage on Georgian Bay. Sloane. This is not about the will, about family. That sentence. I have turned it over in my hands so many times since. This is not about the will. This is about family. As though those two things could be cleanly separated. As though family were a concept that existed above the paperwork. I'll think about it, I said, and ended the call. I thought about it for approximately 48 hours. During that time, I went back and counted. Not angrily, not dramatically. I just sat with my laptop and my records and I went back and counted. Over the previous 4 years, since our father had been diagnosed and then gone into partial retirement, I had contributed the following: $4,500 in grocery and pharmacy during chemo months when both my mother and brother were too overwhelmed to help. $2,200 in flights and gas during 3 separate health scares that turned out to be minor, but that my mother had described on the phone as, "I don't know how much longer he has, Sloane, you need to come." 1 month of my father's home care costs, $1,800, when the family account ran short, and my brother said he'd transfer me back when things settled, which they never did. 18 months of a streaming service subscription on my credit card that my mother used and never once offered to reimburse. A $600 birthday dinner at a Mississauga steakhouse for my father's 70th, which I organized and paid for because my brother was between things financially. That's over $10,000, not including the time, the drives, the shift swaps. The Friday nights I spent in Mississauga watching my mother cry, and my brother tell stories, and my father getting quieter and smaller in his armchair, and me doing the dishes at midnight before the drive home, because no one else would. And I had received $800 in coins, and a note telling me I land on my feet. I called my mother back on the Wednesday. "I'm not contributing to the cottage," I said. The silence lasted about 4 seconds. "Excuse me, I've thought about it. I'm not in a position to contribute $15,000 to a property I have no ownership stake in. This is your father's cottage, Sloane. Your family's cottage. Dad left it to my brother as a management decision. You think he would want us fighting over this? You think this is what he..." Her voice cracked. My mother has always known exactly when to let her voice crack. "I'm not fighting," I said. "I'm declining. Those are different things." She hung up. My brother called that evening. He was calmer than I expected, which should have told me something. "She's really upset," he said. "I know, Sloane. Come on, you know how she gets. If you could just..." "I'm not paying for repairs on a cottage you inherited and plan to sell. It's not that simple. There are costs involved in selling too, you know. Staging, realtor fees. Those come out of the sale price," I said. "That's how selling property works." A pause. Then, "I don't have liquidity right now." I had heard this phrase from my brother so many times over the years that it had lost almost all meaning, the way a word does when you say it too many times in a row. Liquidity. He said it like a diagnosis, like something that happened to him rather than something he'd chosen. "I'm sorry," I said. "I genuinely am, but I can't help with this. Both, honestly." He hung up too. That should have been the end of it. 2 phone calls, 2 rejections, matter closed, but I have the family I have, and so of course it wasn't. Over the next 6 weeks I received the following: a voicemail from my mother's sister, my aunt, in Brampton, whom I speak to maybe twice a year, telling me that your mother is devastated, and that family is all we have. A text from my brother with a photo of a contractor's estimate, no message, just the number circled in red. A card, an actual physical card in the mail, from my mother, with a pressed flower on the front and a 2-page handwritten letter inside, explaining that my father had wanted us to take care of each other, that she was alone now and grieving, and that she didn't understand how you can watch your family struggle and do nothing. She was not struggling. My mother owns her Mississauga townhouse outright. She has a pension from 30 years as a school administrator. She has an RRSP and a TFSA, and as of February whatever remained from my father's accounts after the estate settled. She is not wealthy, but she is stable, she is fine. I did not respond to the card. Then came the email. It was from my brother's email address, but it read like my mother had written it. Or at least drafted it, and had him send it, because she thought it would carry more weight. It said that the family had decided together that my failure to contribute to the estate costs was a breach of family responsibility, and that if I refused to help, I should not expect to be included in family decisions going forward, including any future division of my mother's own estate. I read it twice. Then I printed it. And I put it in a folder with the contractor's estimate text message screenshotted and printed, and the handwritten letter and my own records of every expense I had made over the previous 4 years. I put the folder on my kitchen table and I looked at it for a while. Then I made an appointment with an estate lawyer in Burlington. Her name was Miss Papadakis, and she had the specific calm of someone who has heard every variation of every family disaster and is no longer surprised by any of it. I laid out the whole thing: the will, the exclusion, the $15,000 request, the email. She listened, she asked a few questions, then she said, "They can exclude you from a future estate for any reason or no reason at all. That's entirely within your mother's rights." "I know," I said. "That's not actually why I'm here." She tilted her head. "I want to know if there's any basis for a dependent relief claim against my father's estate," I said, "given the financial contributions I made during his illness." She got very still and professional in the way good lawyers do when something gets interesting. We talked for 90 minutes. I paid for a 2-hour consultation. I left with a clear picture of what I could and could not do, and with one other piece of information I hadn't expected. "The cottage," she said. "You said it's on Georgian Bay. Do you know if there's an existing mortgage?" There wasn't. My father had owned it outright. "And the property taxes are in whose name right now?" I didn't know. I found out the next day through the Ontario Property Registry that the title transfer to my brother had not yet been completed. The estate was still technically in process. Nothing had been finalized. I am going to be honest here. I am not a vengeful person by nature. I don't think about punishing people. I'm a nurse. I went into that profession because I genuinely like taking care of things, animals and people both, and I have a practical streak that generally steers me toward problem solving over scorekeeping. But there is a specific kind of exhaustion that comes from being the person who always absorbs the cost, quietly, and I had been running on that exhaustion for a long time. The estate was still in process. There were legal avenues available that my family, confident in my silence and my compliance, had not considered. I filed for dependent relief. The claim was modest. I wasn't trying to overturn the entire will, but I documented every dollar, every drive, every shift swap, and I submitted it through Ms. Papadakis' office on a Thursday afternoon in early May. The estate lawyer handling my father's file contacted my brother that same week. My mother called me at 7:15 the next morning. "What have you done?" It wasn't a question. Her voice was flat in a way I had never heard before. "I've filed a legal claim," I said. "It's a standard process, Ms. Papadakis can explain it if you are suing your dead father. I'm making a claim against his estate for contributions I made during his illness." "It's different." "How is that different, Sloane? How is that?" She stopped. I could hear her breathing. "You would do this to us. You sent me an email," I said, "telling me I was in breach of family responsibility for not paying $15,000 toward a property I don't own." I decided to address the financial arrangement formally. That seemed consistent with the approach your family was taking. A very long silence. "Your brother," she finally said, "is going to lose the cottage. That depends on the outcome of the claim. It may not come to that. He can't buy you out, Sloane. He doesn't have liquidity," I said. "I know." She hung up for the third time. "What I want to be clear about is that I didn't do this to get the cottage. I don't want the cottage. I have been to Georgian Bay maybe 6 times in my life, and while it's beautiful, a rural property with a septic problem and a roof that needs replacing is not an asset I have any interest in managing. What I had wanted since that beige boardroom in March, was to be seen, not to win. Just to not be invisible." The claim moved slowly, the way legal processes do. My brother hired a lawyer. My mother stopped speaking to me, which was not dramatically different from the baseline. My aunt from Brampton sent another voicemail, longer this time, explaining that I was tearing the family apart, that my father would be heartbroken, that she hoped I would reflect on my choices. I listened to the whole thing while driving to a farm call in Halton Hills where I was coordinating a mobile vet visit for an elderly woman's 3 cats. The cats were named after Canadian prime ministers. The eldest, a massive gray tabby, was Pearson. I thought about that while my aunt talked about family and heartbreak. In late June, my brother's lawyer reached out to Ms. Papadakis with a settlement offer. They offered $8,000. Miss Papadakis recommended I counter. I countered at $11,500. We settled at $9,800. It was not the full amount I had documented. But it was real, and it was on paper, and my brother had to arrange a bridge loan against the cottage sale to pay it, which meant the sale moved forward faster than he'd planned. The cottage sold in August to a family from Barrie for $487,000. After the realtor fees and legal costs and the bridge loan repayment and the settlement to me, my brother netted just over $400,000. I received a bank transfer of $9,800 on a Tuesday in July. I stared at the notification for about 30 seconds. Then I used $4,200 of it to buy a piece of commercial boarding equipment I'd been putting off, and I put the rest toward my business account. My mother didn't speak to me for 4 months. When she finally called, in November, she didn't apologize. She told me she'd seen my aunt for Thanksgiving and that everyone missed me, and that she hoped I was doing well. Her voice was careful in a way it had never been before, like she was recalibrating something. I told her I was doing well. I told her work was busy and the business was growing and that I'd recently taken on a second part-time staff member. I did not mention the settlement. She did not mention the cottage. My brother has not called me at all, which honestly suits me fine. The thing nobody tells you about families like mine, families where one person is always quietly absorbing more than their share, is that the reckoning doesn't always look dramatic. There was no single moment of confrontation where I laid everything out and everyone understood. There was no apology at a dinner table, no tearful reconciliation. There was just a legal process that moved through its stages, a settlement that got deposited, and a slow cellular shift in how my family spoke to me on the rare occasions they did. They're more careful now. That's what I got. Not justice, not acknowledgement, just a little more care. Some days that feels like enough. Some days it doesn't. But I go to work, I check on my boarders, I do Fig's eye drops whenever his family is out of town, and I keep building what I've built, in my house in Oakville, landing on my feet the way my father always knew I would. He wasn't wrong about that. He just never understood what it cost me to do it.